Coming to you from the Windy City. Welcome to Let's Talk Shop, a podcast about all things cloud and enterprise tech. Listen to insights and guest interviews with IT thought leaders and professionals. Now, here's your host, Elias Kanaser.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Let's Talk Shop. I'm excited for this episode. This is going to be a ton of fun. Guess what we're going to be talking about? This is all going to be about generative AI, the hot topic of the moment, and what better guest to have on a conversation of analytics and generative AI than someone from IBM. So it is my great pleasure to have Shobhit Varshney, Vice President and Senior Partner at IBM Consulting. Shobhit, thank you so much for making time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been following your podcast for a while. A big fan. Thanks for
awesome. Thank you so much. So you've got a big topic that we're going to talk about today. But before we get into that, why don't you tell folks a little bit of what you do at IBM, what your role is? Because I love consultants. They're straight to the point. They've got customer use cases. They have a good feeling of the market. They have their pulse on the market. So I'm super excited about this. But for those that don't know you, what do you do at IBM?
I think I have the coolest job at IBM. Half of IBM is IBM Consulting in terms of people. And our objective is to help deliver value for our end clients, deliver AI, automation, and hybrid cloud for our end customers. My role at IBM is as a vice president and senior partner in consulting. I run all of our AI, generative AI, IoT business across US, Canada, and Latin America. And I serve clients across all the various industries, and I help them across the full spectrum of AI, whether it is deep learning, machine learning foundation models, or computer vision with our IoT edge devices. It could be unstructured content with automation, and a lot of work that goes into the contact center space with conversational AI. And across all of those, we partner with our big ecosystem partners like AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google, and of course, our other half of the family, Watsonx.
I'm going to come back to these partnerships because the last thing I ever thought was IBM and AWS or IBM and Azure, for that matter, would be partners. But we're going to come back to that. Let me kick things off. When, as we were preparing for this episode, you guys sent me the IBM CEO survey, which I found fascinating. There was a lot of things in there that I'd love to pick your brain on. But for starters, the survey, and I'll link to all of these, by the way, in the show notes, folks. So if you're interested in taking a look, make sure you look at the links that I'll have down there. There'll be everything we'll talk about during this episode. But the interesting thing about what came out of that survey is, the CEOs, most of the CEOs have a focus on, obviously, productivity. I think that's always and forever going to be number one for CEOs, on technology modernization, and then on generative AI.
Yeah.
Now, the funny part about generative AI, and I don't know if this is just me, I'd love to get your input on this. I'm sure everyone was doing some form of AI before this whole thing kind of exploded, 6 months ago. Or is it just me that, hey, everyone's starting to do generative AI in the last 6 months, or have they been doing it? It just more came to light in the last 6 months.
Absolutely fantastic question. We've been within IBM working on generative AI for 4 or 5 years, and we have had that in some of our products, our IBM Research, Project Debater. All of those are great examples of using large language models. And we've been helping clients and do AI for business. So generative AI itself is not new. What is new is this added creativity that we're being able to add to our existing AI models. So there are traditional AI techniques, everything that we've done from glorified Excel analytics to machine learning and then deep learning. There we were helping make predictions about, say, forecasting, demand planning, things of that nature, right? Fraud detection. Those are very well served with traditional existing AI models. What we're seeing in the industry as we engage with 100+ clients, there are some of those workloads where we're understanding content. So for example, reading a PDF or an invoice is not new. We've been able to do that with all sorts of natural language techniques in the past. What is new is these massive foundation models that are pre-trained. So the time to value to ingest these documents has gone down and plummeted drastically. So now we are leveraging generative AI to have a better understanding of existing content. That's half the use cases for generative AI. The other half of the use cases are creating net new content. whether it's an image or it's a personalized email or it's code for your backend IT developers. So those two areas, better understanding of the existing content and creating net new content. Now we're helping clients with a blend of the two, right? Generally, if you look at a process, like from a consultant's perspective, we're very focused on how work gets done. So say you take mortgage processing as an example. Somebody's applying for a mortgage, goes through all the processes, and finally, yes or no, approved, right? That's a very manual 20, 30 steps process. When we lay it out, we create a smarter workflow for it and say, step number 2, 5, and 9, I can bring in some automation. Step number 6, I can bring in a generative AI model that can understand what was in the application that was sent. So it's a combination of, it's a delicate balance of existing techniques, and then generative AI has certain things that it does incredibly well. I fall off my chair every week when I look at some of the stuff that we're doing with these amazingly large models.
So just so I understand this correctly, then, so what's the hype? If this has been happening, what's all the hype with ChatGPT then? Is it the fact that, is it the second part of what you said, which is the net new content? Is it the generating of the new content that's different? Like, what was all of this that we saw in the last 6 months? What do you call that?
This is such a great time to be alive. So I think the fact that ChatGPT just created a front end for everybody to go experiment with it, they saw the raw power of what these large language models, foundation models are able to do. So earlier I touched on the fact that these are pre-trained. They have a ton of information that has already been trained. So they know how to read contracts. They know how to read call center transcripts. These large language models can go write code for you because they've ingested all of that. So when you start deploying these large language models, earlier with AI, we used to spend a lot of time creating bespoke models for each task. Now you have this massive model that can be slightly adapted to each different domain. And this is something that humans can't do. You can't take somebody who does healthcare, insurance, claim approval and move them over to a financial institution or move them over to a telco and start taking phone calls. But these massive models can do multitasking. They can have multiple hats on. It's like hiring a graduate intern who has multiple degrees. And with very little coaching, you're saying, here's some documents, here's how you read them, and that's it. You're not spending all the effort that we used to 6 months back in training all these knowledge graphs and data scientists needed to go scale these AI models. Now, with very little adaptation, a little bit of prompt engineering, adding some documents of your own, in a matter of minutes, you're able to get good value out of these large language models.
That's awesome. So, I mean, that's a great answer, perfect answer. Let me go back to the survey a little bit. So, in your opinion, you've got a pulse on the market. You're talking a lot to customers. What are some of the barriers that you find for adopting generative AI in general? So that's one. And two, how do you feel that CEOs or others can leverage generative AI capabilities to maybe improve their productivity?
Fair question. I think the number one in the survey that we did with CEOs, the number one concern was trust. How do we trust that these models are not making up a plausible answer and they don't have the right content grounding to actually get to the accurate answer? There are related concerns around security, ethics, bias that has been crept in, and what happens if these models are learning from your own data, right? So those are generally the category of concerns around how do I create a trusted AI system that I have some control over. I can point and say in regulated industry like financial services, healthcare, federal, I need to be able to audit and explain how that answer was created. So we are doing a lot of work with our clients to drive trust in the models. With some of the work that we're doing with Watsonx, we have curated the world's information, cleaned it up to train models that we can stand behind. And then now we're able to adapt those models in different domains. Similarly, when you're looking at techniques that you're using to infer from these models in production, there are quite a few techniques that IBM Consulting uses to ensure the data is grounded, the answer that's being generated. So I'll give you a quick example for a healthcare client. We are doing some knowledge management. They have Medicare population, Medicaid, commercial. If somebody calls an agent and asks a question about what's my ambulance coverage in Colorado, you need to be able to get to an accurate answer and be able to back it up with how you found that answer, and then be able to share all of that in an email back to the end member. So accuracy of the response is very important. In that case, when we produce the answer for them, we have annotations back to where each part of the answer came from. And then we continuously monitor and see when people are engaging with that, do they copy and paste it as is? Do they make any additions, changes to it? How many times do they come back looking at the material and edit it? So we are capturing the data exhaust to make sure that these answers are accurately giving responses. And then there's AI that we're building to monitor the AI responses. So AI monitoring AI to then help us make sure that the answers are accurate. So there's a lot that goes in ensuring that the trust and the accuracy is maintained.
Wow, there's a lot of work being done for AI. So you mentioned something in passing, so I want to double click on it. Are you saying that you're also monitoring or tweaking or getting AI to also be politically correct, tone aware? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, that's absolutely right. So another example, another client, they want to make sure that we don't use certain words. When you onboard a new call center agent, you give them some coaching on what the brand stands for, right? So simple things like AI could be accurate. Another healthcare example, somebody came up with an answer that said they were trying to match which programs can somebody be matched against, right? So somebody calls in and says, hey, based on everything we know about you, here are some government programs to match you. The answer from AI was accurate. It said, because you are overweight, you're eligible for these programs. That's a very bad way of creating an answer. The answer is accurate, but it's biased, right? That's a good example of where we need to do some filtering, both while training the data and every response is coming out. You need to have some moderation layers around the answers. So that way it represents the brand that they're standing for. So there's a lot that goes into making sure your tone is getting transferred to the model, the data that it's fine-tuned on, the data it was originally trained on, all of those are free of bias and hate and things of that nature. And same also goes for anything with copyright infringement issues, right? If you went out to the internet and trained yourself on data, you may not have the right legal things that you've aligned to get all of that data securely and then be training the models. So there's a lot that goes into the data lineage and all the data end-to-end for that.
So I love what you said about the AI's tone has to be able to represent the brand. That you should quote that. That's perfectly said. For someone for CEOs, for CIOs, for senior leaderships that's listening to you today, especially because you're in consulting. For me, I used to be a consultant. This feels like a lot of work. Like it almost would feel like folks would shy away from this just because of how much work it is. Is it this much work? Is it this complex? Or is it a lot easier, but in explaining it, it comes across as a lot of work?
So it's the overall effort is lower. I'm very encouraged by what our community, the AI community, is doing together to create the right set of tools to make this as easy as possible.
Okay.
You should be able to bring a model, and again, the larger AI community has just been phenomenal to work with. We do a lot of work with Hugging Face, Clem and team there. We would bring a model over. We would add your curated data sets to it. All of those are pretty point and click and move, right? So it's become very easy for people to tap into this generative AI space. And I think this is a point of diversion a little bit. Earlier, so there's a pendulum that's swinging. We used to, a few years back, 4 or 5 years back, my entire team used to have a lot of senior data scientists who would go build models for forecasting, demand, things of that nature, right? Those used to be very siloed AI engagements and driven more by data scientists. That pendulum is swinging, and now we're at a point where we can co-create with the business, and it'll keep swinging further with generative AI to a point where business will be independent and with natural language be able to get to the value that they earlier needed deep data science talent for. So going back to an earlier question that you had hinted on, the CEOs right now are focusing a lot on how do I infuse generative AI at the particular step where work gets done. Every attempt that we have made historically on taking AI and infusing it in say, the BPO finance use cases or supply chain and things of that nature, that back office is very price sensitive. So every time I would bring somebody from a great institution and say like some PhD in data science to come work with them, the price point used to be a hurdle. The amount of time it takes to go train a model, the whole knowledge graph for that particular use case, variations in the documents and the invoices that we are seeing, it just takes a lot of effort. Now the pendulum has swung to a point where that person who does finance for a living has access to all of these tools where they can show a couple of variations, a little bit of examples, and you have an answer and you have it trained.
I love it. I love it. The technology has become accessible to everyone, not just large organizations that can afford the data scientists that you were talking about. So that's perfect. So let me ask you, from your experience, what are the 2 to 3 capabilities that organizations or enterprises need to be aware of, need to take into account if they're trying to scale their generative AI models?
So let me first talk about the capabilities that you get from generative AI. There are 2 categories of things I touched on before. One was understanding documents better, right? There we are looking at summarization or being able to pull key elements from documents, right? The finance use case, let's stick to that for a bit. If I have a financial document and I want to compare what's the percentage discount that this contract allows me to apply, I need to be able to have some sort of a logic where I can explain the model to go read these things and pull out this percentage discount. We're working for a very large consumer goods company where in the procurement business, they get a lot of invoices coming in and they compare the discount applied against the contract. That's a very manual process. So anywhere where we are seeing document comparison, a human looks at the invoice, they look at the percentage discount, compare the two and say this is correct or not, right? In those workflows where we need to understand the documents better, it's a great use case for generative AI. Any place where you're sitting on a set of repository of knowledge behind your firewalls, how do you securely have a conversation like ChatGPT would against your own private data without the model learning from you? Those are great conversational knowledge search and summarization use cases. The second category was when you're creating net new content. It could be I'm creating images, videos, an ad campaign. I'm creating a hyper-personalized email based on what I know about you and what you're complaining about. It could be creating code, or it could be code conversions from one language to another language. All of those are great capabilities that we are seeing for generative AI. So you asked me a question about what capabilities should we think about from what we can get from generative AI. The other side of the equation is who's using it. On the consumption side, we need people who understand their domain really well. They understand what are the variations that I will see in the kind of calls that I get in my telco contact center. Or when I'm working with somebody in an industrial setting, what kind of manuals do they get? This morning, I was with a big electric company where they know the part number by heart. The CEO grew up doing that. But now when you go to their website and you're trying to find a particular coupling or a particular circuit, unless you know that domain, you will be lost. That's a great opportunity for generative AI to step in. And somebody who's in the domain can transfer their knowledge over to that model, and that model can now help with infinite capacity everybody else.
Fantastic. That's awesome. So because you're in consulting, and I know you've sprinkled this already in some of the answers, but just to ask you this question kind of straight up, are you working on, is there any use case, 1 or 2 use cases that you're currently working on with customers that you're able to share? I know there's some stuff that's under NDA, but is there anything that you can share with our listeners that would be interesting?
Yes, absolutely. So we've been very proud of being a partner with clients where they're trying to build their own models from scratch. 2 great examples are Moderna and NASA.
Okay.
Moderna has been engaged with us on building foundation models that help understand the language of molecules, right? They're trying to predict the next drug. How do you code that knowledge into a large language model, into foundation models? And those foundation models are helping you predict the next set of drugs that you should be working on. Similarly, NASA, since we own the weather company, we have a ton of hyperlocal geospatial data. We're creating a model that will help NASA with multiple predictions. So those are 2 great categories of 2 examples of where we're building net new ground up models that will deliver a lot of competitive advantage to them. Then there are a lot of examples where we are adapting existing models. And the models could be insanely large models from OpenAI, GPT-4. It could be Google's Palm 2. It could be AWS partnership with Cloud 2 or AWS's own Titan models. We're using all of those models and adapting it to a client's domain. We're fine-tuning it for that understanding of legal documents, so we can build a legal document or a procurement example for them. So across the spectrum, like at Citigroup, for example, we're helping them with audit documents. There are thousands of documents that you need to ingest and be able to make sense of those, make sure that all of them have all the accurate things that need to be included. Right? Similarly, with Boris Telecom, we're helping them in the contact center space. There are umpteen examples where we have delivered generative AI in production for the clients, and you have to monitor, manage them for accuracy, things of that nature.
Fascinating. That's all. Thank you for naming names, by the way, and giving me some good use. Again, that's why I like consulting guys. They're straight to the point. They'll give it to you straight up. Another aspect that we were talking about, and that's very interesting to me, this is considering, I spent 7 years at Gartner and I followed IBM and the cloud providers very closely. But there is a partnership between IBM and AWS, which took me a little bit by surprise. Now, there's always some level of cooperation between the tech companies, but I always viewed IBM and AWS in particular as, frenemies, let's call it. But I'm curious, what are you guys working on together? Like, what is AWS and IBM? Like, what are you guys doing, especially now that we're on the cusp of the AWS Summit in New York?
So I think if you look at IBM as a company, we're very unique in the sense we have IBM Consulting. Half of IBMers are part of consulting. Then you have IBM Technology, you have IBM Research. It's a very unique combination of things. No other big competitor has this unique set of skills under one roof, right? So when we partner with companies like AWS, our IBM Consulting, we have been certifying ourselves. We've been delivering these at scale for clients for a while at this point. We have a lot of joint successes with AWS. A lot of the workloads that we're deploying are on AWS. From my vantage point on the AI side, we've delivered a ton of clients on SageMaker, Amazon Connect, all the great work that the Amazon team is doing on the AWS cloud. So consulting has been a great partner, scaling up AWS on the data workloads, on the AI workloads, and now the journey with generative AI is even faster.
So you're saying IBM Consulting is AWS friendly, but IBM Technology is not.
IBM Technology, I'll get to that next. On IBM Technology side, there's a lot of complementary capabilities that we are bringing in. So there's certain aspects of our software that complement what's available on AWS, and there's a good partnership between the product teams. We have a good sense of what the product timelines are, what features are going to be added. Our Watsonx, for example, is a different way of going to market.
About that, yeah.
When you look at on our technology side, Watsonx is thinking about data.ai and .governance. When clients are engaging with us on their generative AI and AI journey at large, they're very cautious about what data goes into the training. And that data, to be honest, is going to be in the hybrid environment. You'll have data workloads all over AWS, Azure, Google's, IBM clouds. How do you monitor and manage in a very cost-effective manner, centrally where that data resides? And you have to cleanse all of that to be able to feed it into the AI and generative AI models. That's where our .ai comes in. .ai helps you fine-tune the models, prompt them, and make them ready for consumption, make it as easy as possible for somebody to deploy them. And then our .governance helps us manage these AI models across all your ecosystem clouds. So for example, consulting may go and build a model on SageMaker on AWS and deploy it there. That could be in 2-3 different lines of businesses. One line of business in another country may have certain workloads on Azure. You want to have a centralized view and a process to govern these models everywhere. So that's some of the complementary nature of what our products are bringing. And then IBM Consulting being specialists on both the sides, we can be the glue in the middle as well.
Great answer. That's a consulting answer. Congratulations. Let me shift gears on you a little bit. So IBM has been doing emerging technologies for a very long time, right? One in particular is quantum. Quantum has been something that IBM has been doing for, a really long time. But quantum has always been very niche, so to speak. And every year it's like, well, this is the year where quantum is going to make kind of a breakthrough. With this whole generative AI and analytics really becoming front and center, where does quantum play? Is quantum going to be something that's on the side, something that's going to support, help with scalability, or is quantum something completely different? How should I be viewing these two things?
So those are a very good question. And when we talk about technologies, future looking, we've been working on quantum for a very long time, and we've been leaders in the space. If you get a chance, you should come over to our quantum lab. It's fascinating. We've had the privilege of in the last few years, we have had clients and partners across 210 plus Fortune 500 companies, right? So we've learned a lot around how they see the value that we could deliver with quantum computing, and we've been partnering on specific use cases across the whole spectrum. So we have a lot of real world client experience that's being pulled in. Quantum computing is complementary to our existing computing world, right? So there are certain workloads that would work better on quantum. It's not an either or. It's not an evolution saying our existing computing, traditional computing will evolve into quantum. It'll coexist. There's certain workloads that are much better suited to our existing infrastructure. So I don't think that quantum is taking away from generative AI. Generative AI would help. There's more of a complementary nature, helping each other rather than replacing each other.
Interesting. Very interesting. So will quantum help in scalability at all for AI?
Yes, absolutely. There are quite a few workloads that'll be better suited on scaling. If you look at certain problems that require parallel processing across all these different decisions to be made, quantum computers are very well suited for those kind of use cases.
So, Shobhit, let me ask you: Are we building Skynet? Should we be worried?
I don't think we're building Skynet yet. We're quite a bit away from artificial general intelligence. We are making our way from narrow intelligence into a little bit wider now, but we are way far away from general intelligence. That's from my vantage point. I think the community. Sorry.
No, please continue your thought.
I think the AI community has been very cautious about how do you set the right guardrails so that we don't get into a Skynet kind of situation. We recently had Christina from our team. She was our chief privacy officer. She gave a Senate hearing on our stance on how we think these large language models or generative AI, how these should have precision regulation around it. So I think it's a matter of mutual education to set the right policies on how do we govern these. I think the tools are there. There's a lot of work that the AI community is doing to create the tools to help humans regulate and understand what's happening. Humans, we are very lazy. If you give us a whole novel and say, here's a big fat novel, here's the summary that this model generated.
Read the summary.
Is this accurate? I would not go through the actual manual effort to read the book to validate the summaries as accurate or not. But we have now at our fingertips AI models that help us curate all of that data, bring it in, so we can accelerate the human reinforcement learning. I think the bigger challenge we have as a community is figuring out whose definition of fair do we put into these models. We are very biased. Like if you look at application approval from credit cards historically, or recruiting, we're very biased against certain ethnicities, certain age groups, certain income brackets, things of that nature. If you take all of that data as is and train a model, you're transferring your bias into that model. So we're doing a lot
Racist
of
AI.
to ensure that we have the right toolkits available to detect bias, to remove bias, so we can build trust into the model. And this, we call it internally ethics by design. So everybody within IBM needs to understand how these data models, how these AI models are going to impact the downstream workloads, and be very transparent about what it's trained on, what data went into training. Can I pinpoint how this answer was created? So auditability, transparency, those are some of the principles across IBM.
That's fascinating. I'm happy to hear that IBM is looking at things from an ethical perspective. They're looking at things from a responsible perspective. And I think all of the other technology companies that are in this space are probably also approaching this the same way. I think that's the only way we will be able to leverage this technology without necessarily hurting ourselves. I'm also happy to hear that we're far away from building Skynet. So that's good news. My time is up with you. I feel like I want to ask you like 20 more questions. And I want to delve into IoT because I know you also cover IoT. So folks, let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed this session with Shobhit and if we should bring him back. But no, jokes aside, I'd love to have you back maybe in a couple of months, maybe when we get closer to reInvent. You're going to be at the show, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Maybe we could do something there, kind of in the same room, but we'll talk a little bit more. We'll talk about generative AI, but I'd love to also talk to you about what's going on at the edge, specifically from an IoT perspective.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. It's such an exciting time. Our clients that we work with so closely are both super excited about the opportunity and becoming a differentiator for them, but they're also very concerned about the talent that's needed, the risks that come with it. So it's been a great position for IBM Consulting to help coach them, bring the right set of talent. We launched about 1,000 people generative AI COE that helping engaging across AWS, Azure, Googles of the world, Watsonx. We're helping our clients think about this maturely in every step along the way, the data, the lineage, how to deploy it. And because IBM Consulting does a lot of the workloads, we are embedded in how finance, how call centers work, how marketing works. So we are very grounded on which use cases are actually going to deliver value for the clients. So it's been a great opportunity for us to engage with the clients, and I'm very thankful for the fact that they engage us on their most transformational point in the entire history. I can't think of a year in my entire career that I would rather be alive than 2023.
And today, right?
Yes.
Shobhit, thank you so much for making the time today. I learned a ton. I hope everybody that's watching and listening this took a lot of value from it. I'm going to leave some links in the description to the survey we talked about and to a bunch of other things that everyone should take a look at. Thank you again for making the time, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks so much. It's an absolute pleasure.
Take care now.